What do you know? What do you know? What do you really know? What do you think you know? This video is about epistemology, the philosophy of knowledge. How do we know what we know? It's not an exhaustive video on the topic, but maybe it will whet your appetite and maybe it'll tweak your interest a little bit and question some of the things that you know or you think you know. Perhaps it's a strange thing. Here I'm a Catholic priest and I'm basically going to be asking you to doubt all sorts of things that you know. Have you ever read Rene Descartes' Meditations? Especially his Meditations number 1 and 2? I'd like to read it to you, but it's a bit long. I encourage you to look it up. He starts to doubt everything. And I'm going to place the seeds of doubt in your mind about knowledge. In one of my earlier videos called "To be an Atheist is to be Against Science," I related a story, an experience that I had when I walked into a pharmacy just before closing, and the cashier said, "Do you know what you're looking for, sir? We're just about to close." I said, "Yes, I'm looking for little bottles of Purell." She said, "I don't know if we have that or not. If we do, they're in aisle 4. I went over. I didn't see any little bottles of Purell, so I walked out, and the store manager intercepted me and asked me if I found everything I was looking for. I said, "No, I'm looking for little bottles of Purell. You only have larger bottles." And she said, "There's no such thing." And I thought, what a silly thing. I just left, but what a silly thing to say, that there's no such thing as little bottles of Purell. And just to play with it in that video, I said, she's like a little bottle of Purell atheist. Now, before you atheists, if you're watching this, just go back and look at that other video and then look at the other video, positive atheist or negative atheist. Don't get too excited now. And I called the cashier a little bottle of Purell agnostic because she wasn't sure, but she thought there might be. Well, what about us? What about you? Do you believe in little bottles of Purell? Do you know that they exist? Seeing is believing, right? Let me ask you another question. Do you know if the Americans walked on the moon? Do you believe that they walked on the moon? If you go on YouTube, unless YouTube has banned them all because they want to get rid of conspiracy theories, but if you go on YouTube and just search that, has man walked on the moon or USA Moonwalk or anything like this, and you'll find some people saying that that was all a propaganda stunt. That was the Cold War, don't you know? And they were fighting, they were racing against the clock for morale and propaganda against the Russians who had already sent a rocket into space. So they made it all up. It was a Hollywood set, don't you know? And they filmed some of it up in Sudbury. Have you ever been to Sudbury? Kind of looks like a moonscape. Yes, and they have all sorts of theories about shadows and wind and everything else. Magnetic fields that they'd have to go through. Look, I believe the Americans walked on the moon, absolutely. Hey, I saw it on TV. I was just a little boy. It was a black and white TV, but I saw it with my own eyes. Okay, let me ask you another question. Do you think that electrons exist? Electrons. Have you ever seen one? Hey, I believe in the existence of electrons, protons, neutrons. I believe in atomic theory, the periodic table, all of that. I've studied physics and chemistry and biology. I believe in the existence of electrons, but I've never seen one. Okay, let me take it a little step further, because all of this has to do with the relationship between knowledge and faith. John Cardinal Newman wrote a book called The Grammar of Assent. It's a philosophical work. In a nutshell, it's not fair to it, but I'll just say it like this. With every piece of information that we would consider knowledge, that you and I would consider knowledge, each person would consider knowledge to be true, factual, we have to assent our will. We have free will. We can refuse to believe things, even with lots and lots of evidence. We can accept to believe things with no evidence. We could choose to believe things that are contrary to our senses or to the evidence presented to us. I'm a Catholic priest. I believe everything that the Catholic Church presents to us for belief on the level of faith and morals. I believe in all the dogmas of the Catholic Church. Do I understand them all? Can I prove them in the sense of looking under a microscope or a telescope, as the case may be? And some of you may be watching this, you're not Catholic, you're atheist, or maybe you think you know so much about the Catholic faith, but you might not. What you hear about the Catholic faith and what Catholics believe might not be all accurate. Nonetheless, I'm a Catholic priest and I believe in all of those things. But why would I? And why would you? Or why would anybody? Let's go back to the electrons. We've never seen one, but most of us, I would say, who are watching this video, if you have at least, I think, a grade 7 or 8 education, you believe in atomic theory. Quite firmly, as I do. Why? It's not like we had a lot of life experience. It's not like, our grade 7 science teacher, brought out a whole bunch of experiments for us to kind of convince us. No, he or she told us, and we had to memorize the periodic table and all sorts of things like this. And we were quizzed on it, and we were tested on it, and there was probably an exam at the end of the year about it. And we all believe it, we all accept it. But we would say, well, why would my science teacher lie to me? I mean, we're going to school, right? They're imparting knowledge to us. That's the whole point of going to school, right? Now, for some of you who are older, you know that there are certain worldviews and agendas also being taught in the schools. In some cases, the children are being indoctrinated with certain, especially political worldviews. That's a topic for another video, but when we're young, we just accept it. We're being taught these things, and it's true, because why wouldn't it be? Like, why would our teacher lie? Well, how about this? If your science teacher did not teach you about electrons and protons and neutrons, do you think that science teacher would have a job for very long? Say they taught that those things don't really exist, or they even ignored teaching those things? No, they are hired to teach those things. They would lose their job. When Jesus walked the earth, the Romans occupied the Holy Land. And there was a law that everyone who lived in the empire had to offer sacrifices and prayers and various appeasements to the gods. They were religious people. Maybe it's hard for us to understand in this secular age that we live in, but everyone believed in the supernatural. Most of them were polytheists. They believed in many gods. There was a god for fertility, and there was a god for good crops, and there was a god for war gods and everything like this. And they would have their devotions to these gods so that they would be successful in this or that other area of their life. So the Romans made it a law that everyone had to offer sacrifices and prayers to the gods to appease them so that the empire would prosper. So there wouldn't be famines, and they wouldn't lose on the battlefront and all of this. Now, there were many Jewish people living in the Roman Empire. The Jews saw it as occupied territory, really. But the Romans were in charge. Do you think the Jews were going to offer sacrifices to, I don't know, Zeus? No, they wouldn't. Because if you know anything about Judaism, there's the first commandment that Moses brought to them of the 10 Commandments, remember? I am the Lord your God, shall have no other gods before me. There was no way that they were going to commit what they would consider idolatry. However, the Romans were not stupid. They saw that there were many, many Jews, so they populated the land, and they also recognized that they were a people of great antiquity. So the Romans figured that the gods must at least tolerate them. And the Jewish leaders, they made a deal with the Romans. Not that they would worship their gods, but they would pray for the empire and for the emperor to their God, the one God who made heaven and earth. So that was good. So the Jewish people had an exemption from that law. By the way, if anyone did not try to appease the gods, they would be charged with treason because they were superstitious, right? The Romans, that is. So if you don't appease the gods, bad things could happen. So that is treasonous. And the penalty for that was death. Now, you know what happened. You know the history. Jesus was arrested upon false charges, and he was convicted for treason. On the top of the cross, it said, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And that's what the Romans put there. That was his sentence. So everyone knew when they saw him crucified and dying on the cross, they would know why he was being crucified. And then there were two convicts, one on each side. One we call the good thief. So thievery, punishable by death. Okay. As Christians, we believe that Jesus was buried, that he was put in a tomb on Friday before sunset. But on Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, and Jesus appeared to her. She thought he was the gardener, remember? And then he said, go and tell my brothers, go and tell the apostles. And Jesus appeared to the apostles and to many, many other people for 40 days. And then he ascended before their eyes into heaven. He rose into the sky. That seems pretty unbelievable, don't you think? That someone rose from the dead and then he just kind of floated up into sky. This almost sounds like fantasy or made up. Here's the thing. The apostles were devout Jews. So after Pentecost, so 10 days after the ascension, when the Holy Spirit came down upon them and they were emboldened with courage and they weren't afraid anymore, they went to the synagogues and they went to the places where the men gathered and to the temple gates, and they would tell everyone that Jesus rose from the dead. Some of them had seen it and would collaborate, had seen Jesus after he died, so they would collaborate with that, and others didn't, and many never heard of any of the collaborations. And then it was up to people who were listening to the apostles whether to believe them or not. And they were basically saying, Jesus is the promised Messiah, going back to the Old Testament prophets. He rose from the dead, and you must believe in him, and you must be baptized, because he's establishing a new covenant. Well, as you can imagine, some of the Jewish leaders were not too impressed. They did not believe the apostles at all. So what they did, especially as the apostles became more and more successful in convincing people that Jesus rose from the dead, so some of the Jewish leaders, they said, okay, anyone who believes or claims that Jesus of Nazareth is alive or rose from the dead, you cannot be considered Jewish anymore. You're kicked out. You're excommunicated. Well, this made them vulnerable then, these new Christians, right? Because they are not going to offer sacrifice to the Roman gods either, are they? No, they're not, because they also believe in one God. So someone could be now accused of being a Christian, which is not a religion or a people of antiquity, like the Jewish people were. They were completely vulnerable. And if you're accused of Christian, what it really meant was that you're being accused of being an atheist because you're not offering sacrifice to the gods. You don't believe in the gods. And you're putting the empire at risk, in danger. So someone would be arrested, accused of being a Christian, that is an atheist. And the punishment, if convicted, is death. Fed to the lions or crucified or stoned to death or whatever the case may be. Now the Romans, though, they were civilized. They didn't really want to kill all those people. And they had, they had a court, it was kind of a court of justice. It might have been somewhat impromptu. However, they would bring someone before someone was accused, being accused of being an atheist. How do you plead, And they might say, yeah, I'm a Christian, I believe. Okay, listen, we're going to give you a chance here, okay? Because it's getting late and we don't really want to put you to death here. We don't have time to crucify you or something. So just, here, we have a little bit of a makeshift altar. We have a little figurine of one of the gods. Here's some incense. Just sprinkle some incense on the altar, will you? And just while you're at it, just curse the name of Jesus, because we heard that no true believer of Jesus would curse his name. And you know what? Many of the Christians did that. They spared their lives and they walked away. When the apostles were arrested, however, none of them denied it. I can imagine the conversation going something like this. Oh, you're one of the apostles, are you? You're one of his followers. You're one of his close disciples. Aha. Okay, listen. Just tell us where you hid the body, will you? Where did you put the body? He ascended into heaven. There's no body to be found. It's not on earth. Look, you're an apostle. Spare your life. Look at the others. They spared their lives. I cannot. We'll make you a senator. If you deny that Jesus, you just tell us that you're making up a lie. And we'll get you off, don't worry, and we'll make you a senator. I cannot deny the truth. Friends, they could not deny that Jesus rose from the dead any more than you and I could deny that there's such a thing as little bottles of Purell. We believe our science teacher, yet, maybe I put a little bit of doubt in your mind, our science teacher had to teach us of the existence of electrons. They weren't going to lose their life, but they were going to lose their job. They would lose their job. What about the Americans walking on the moon? Suppose North America gets invaded by communist Chinese. Suppose they say, you guys, you Americans, you have to renounce your capitalism. Capitalism is not the best. You're communists now. Anyone who believes that the Americans walked on the moon, anyone who believes that is not just mere propaganda, You're going to be arrested. You're going to put in jail. We're going to keep you in jail for the rest of your life. We're going to set up slave camps, or we're going to put you to death maybe. Would you still believe that the Americans walked on the moon? I would get my doubts. I would get skeptical pretty quick, I'm going to tell you. If it was going to be me sent away to some camp or be executed or put to jail for the rest of my life, I would say, yeah, I think it was probably propaganda. And I'd probably pick up all of the arguments that the conspiracy theorists have. What about the existence of electrons? I've never seen one. What about little balls of Purell? What if that was illegal? I mean, let's get really absurd here. What if it's illegal to believe in the existence of little bottles of Purell? What, that? No. That's medium size. Everyone knows little bottles of Purell don't exist. You want to die? Do you want to go to jail for the rest of your life based on your belief that little bottles of Purell exist? I'd find some way in my head to get around denying the existence of those things if it was illegal to believe in the existence of little balls of Purell. But what about that Jesus rose from the dead? Let's hope that it doesn't come to that in North America. Thank God we still live in a free country, free countries. But it could happen. It could happen. And what would you do? What do you know? What do you really know? What do you really believe? Friends, most of our knowledge is based on us believing, assenting our will to things that have been told to us from other people. And yes, as we get older and we get more and more educated, if it all fits together, then we're more likely to believe it. And if it doesn't fit with our worldview, then we're less likely to believe it. But I propose for your thoughts, and leave some comments if you want, that most of what we believe is not through scientific first-hand experimentation, but is simply based on what others have told us, and we believe them. In Viam Patches.